The great hall of Valorheim Castle trembled with laughter. Torches blazed against stone walls carved with the names of fallen alphas, and the scent of mead and roasted meat hung thick in the winter air. The feast was in full swing. Nobles from the northern territories gathered to witness the coronation trials, their furs and jewels catching firelight like scattered blood on snow. Alara moved between them like smoke. Her gray servant's dress was threadbare at the hem, her hands calloused from years of scrubbing hearths and mending the torn cloaks of warriors who never glanced down to acknowledge her. The iron collar around her neck, marking her as an omega of no lineage, no worth, no future, caught the light only when she bent low enough to pour wine. Most guests didn't even notice the chain. "Look at her tremble," one of the courtiers sneered, gesturing toward the trial platform where young alphas were being tested for strength. "Even the servant girls have more backbone than half these contenders." Alara's jaw tightened. She had learned long ago not to react. Invisibility was survival. Silence was sanctuary. But tonight felt different. The air crackled with something electric, something that made the hairs on her arms rise despite the roaring fire. She could feel it in the way the crowd's energy shifted, how even the most arrogant nobles seemed to hold their breath. Then the doors opened. The wind that swept in extinguished 3 torches at once. Snow, pristine, untouched, swirled across the threshold like a living thing, and with it came him, King Ryden Blackthorn. The whispers started immediately. Alara had heard the stories. Everyone had. The young Alpha King who had taken the throne 5 years ago after his father's assassination. Brilliant in strategy, merciless in war, but marked by something darker. A curse, they said. A wound that wouldn't heal. Some claimed he had made a terrible choice in battle, sacrificed an entire village to save his own bloodline. Others said the Deathless One herself had cursed his line for pride. What they all agreed on was this. Ryden Blackthorn was beautiful and broken in equal measure. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of presence that made lesser alphas instinctively lower their eyes. His hair was black as a moonless night, and his eyes, when they caught the light, were the color of old silver, metallic and ancient. He wore armor of burnished steel, but it was the scar that drew every gaze. It ran from his left temple down to his jaw, white and jagged against his olive skin. The curse mark, they called it, the sign that even kings could bleed. He did not smile. He did not bow to the assembled crowd. He simply walked to the throne, his throne, and sat. The trials resumed, but the energy had shifted. Every contender was trying twice as hard now, performing for an audience of one. None of them noticed the shift in Ryden's expression, the slight tightening at the corners of his mouth, the way his silver eyes seemed to look through the hall rather than at it. Alara noticed. She had always been good at noticing things that others missed. It was part of her curse, an Omega's particular sensitivity to emotion, to truth beneath surface. Her mother had called it the gift before she died, before Alara was branded a servant and sent to Valorheim to forget she'd ever had a name. As she circled the crowd with wine, moving like a ghost between bodies, she caught fragments of conversation. The eastern territories grow restless. Heard his scouts found something in the frozen deep. Says the old prophecy is waking again. She was passing near the throne when she heard it, so quiet it might have been her imagination. A sound like a wolf's whimper, but human, in pain. Her eyes flickered up. Ryden's hand was pressed against his side, beneath the armor. His jaw was locked so tight she thought his teeth might shatter. His eyes, those terrible, beautiful silver eyes, were squeezed shut. The curse, she thought. It's burning him. Without thinking, without the survival instinct that had kept her invisible for so long, Alara stopped. She set down her wine pitcher and stepped closer to the throne. "Your Majesty," she whispered, so quietly that only he could hear it above the roar of the crowd. "You're bleeding through the armor." His eyes snapped open. For a moment, There was nothing but shock in that silver gaze, the pure, visceral shock of being truly seen by someone he had never noticed. And in that moment, something shifted in the world. The fire in the hearths burned brighter. The snow outside the windows fell in a perfect spiral. Every wolf in the kennels beneath the castle began to howl, a sound so mournful it stopped conversations mid-sentence. Ryden's hand gripped the armrest so hard it cracked. "What is your name, servant?" His voice was rough, scarred like his face. "Alara," she breathed. "My name is Alara." He stared at her for 3 heartbeats. Then he looked away, and the moment shattered like ice. "Leave me," he commanded, his voice suddenly cold enough to freeze blood. "All of you. The trials are finished." The hall erupted in confused protest, but no one dared disobey. As the crowd dispersed into the corridors, muttering in outrage, Alara remained frozen beside the throne. She had broken the cardinal rule: never speak to the Alpha unless commanded, never draw attention, never, ever let him see you. She had been seen, and now she was sure she would be punished. Ryden did not look at her again as he rose from the throne and walked toward the private chambers, his hand still pressed against his side. But as he passed, his cloak, torn at the hem, ragged and ancient, brushed her leg, and she felt it, a spark of recognition, of destiny, of something vast and terrible opening its eyes for the first time in centuries. Later, locked in the servants' quarters, Alara would touch the iron collar at her throat and feel the drop of dried blood that adorned it. She would remember the prophecy the old healers whispered about, the one about an Omega whose touch could break even the deepest curse. She did not yet understand what the Alpha King had seen in her eyes, but she knew, with the certainty of the marked and the doomed, that everything was about to change. And the moon, rising full and silver over Valorheim, seemed to hang lower in the sky that night, watching, waiting for the reckoning to begin. 3 days passed in careful silence. Alara returned to her duties, clearing ash from the great hearth, mending torn tapestries, scrubbing wine stains from marble floors, but the invisible weight of being seen had not lifted. It had transformed into something heavier, the weight of knowing that an Alpha King had noticed her, and that in the eyes of the court, this made her something far more dangerous than a servant. Whispers followed her through the castle corridors. The Omega who spoke to Ryden without permission. They say she's cursed, that she brought the wolves howling. She should be exiled. No servant dares approach the throne. But no punishment came, and that silence was somehow worse than exile would have been. On the 4th night, as Alara was preparing the king's chambers for sleep, replacing candles, warming the hearth, she found him standing at the window, silhouetted against the moonlight. He was shirtless. His back was to her, and she saw the truth beneath the armor. His body was a map of wounds. Scars crisscrossed his spine. Some were old, faded to silver like his eyes. Others were fresh, angry red beneath the skin, as if something was burning him from the inside. "The healers say it's spreading," Ryden said quietly. He had not turned around. "The curse. It was dormant for years, but something has woken it. They don't know why." Alara should have left, should have backed out of the room and forgotten she had seen him like this, vulnerable, broken, human beneath the crown. Instead, she whispered, "May I help?" He turned slowly. His silver eyes studied her face as if she were a riddle he was trying to solve. "You are not afraid of me." "I am terrified," Alara admitted, her voice steady despite the way her hands trembled. "But I have learned that fear and mercy are not opposites. They are companions." Something flickered across his face, recognition perhaps, or hunger, the kind of hunger that comes from being alone too long. "Touch the scar," he commanded, "the one on my face. I want to know if you can feel what the healers cannot." Alara moved forward slowly. The air between them grew thick, electric. She could smell him now, smoke and snow and something wilder, something that made her omega nature tremble with instinctive response. She reached up and placed her hand against the white scar that ran down his jaw, and she felt it. A wound that was not of the body, a wound in the fabric of his being, a tear between what he had done and what he believed himself to be. The curse was not magic. It was guilt made flesh. It was every person he had failed to save, every choice he had made that had sacrificed the innocent. Her breath caught. "You see it," he said. It was not a question. "I feel it," Alara whispered. "You are dying from the inside, not from magic, from remorse." Ryden's hand came up and covered hers against his scarred face. "Then you understand why I cannot keep you here. Why the moment you leave this room, I must deny knowing your name. The curse, it will spread to anyone close to me. It always does." "No," Alara said, and she was surprised by the certainty in her voice. "The curse spreads because you are alone with it, because you believe you deserve to suffer. But I—" She paused, feeling the truth rise in her like tide. "I was born to this. My mother called it the gift. I can walk in broken places and not be broken by them." "You are an omega," Ryden said, but there was no cruelty in it, just a statement of fact. "The lowest rank, the most vulnerable. How could you possibly—" "Because strength is not measured by rank," Alara interrupted. "The lowest are often the strongest. We have learned to survive what the mighty would not." Ryden stared at her for a long moment. Then he pulled her closer, and his forehead rested against hers. It was not a gesture of passion. It was a gesture of surrender. "If I keep you near me," he said softly, "they will call you my whore. The court will destroy you. The other alphas will see you as a threat. This curse, it will test you in ways you cannot imagine." "I know," Alara said, "and I choose it anyway." The moment stretched between them, infinite and fragile as a snowflake. Outside, the wind howled against the castle walls. Snow began to fall in heavy, deliberate sheets, as if the world itself was holding its breath. And somewhere in the depths of Valorheim, the wolves began to sing again, a sound no longer mournful, but expectant. Ryden pulled back and looked at her with those ancient silver eyes. "Come with me. There is a place beneath the castle, a place where the curse cannot follow. If I am to keep you safe, you must understand what you are walking into." He took her hand, and Alara felt the iron collar at her throat grow warm, as if awakening. They moved through the castle like ghosts, descending into the deep places where torchlight did not reach. Ryden carried a torch that burned with blue flame. Ancient magic, older than the kingdom itself. As they descended, the air grew colder and the walls began to change. Stone gave way to something else, something carved with symbols that hurt to look at directly. At the bottom of the stairs, there was a chamber. Inside, on an altar of black ice, lay a book bound in leather that looked disturbingly like human skin. And around the book, written in what Alara prayed was paint and not blood, were words in a language she did not speak but somehow understood. "Here lies the truth of the curse. Here lies the price of the blood oath. Here lies the name of the one who can break it." Ryden placed the torch in an iron sconce and turned to her. "My father made a covenant with the old powers. He promised them a sacrifice to win the war in the East, a village of innocents, 2,000 souls. In exchange for their lives, he was given dominion over all the northern territories." "But you were prince," Alara said quietly. "You could not stop it." "I could have," Ryden said, and his voice was like breaking ice. "I was there. I saw the smoke rise, and I said nothing because my father promised me the throne." Alara moved to him and took both his hands. "Then you have already been condemned for this. You have carried the weight for so long that it has become part of your flesh, but condemning yourself further will not bring them back." "No," Ryden agreed. "But the curse says there is a way to break the covenant, a way to undo what my father bound, It requires a sacrifice of equal weight, an Omega born with the gift, willing to take the curse into themselves. Ilara's blood went cold. She understood now why he had told her to leave, why he had tried to push her away. "I will not ask this of you," Raiden said fiercely. "I will not. Even if I die, even if the curse consumes me entirely, I will not." "I know," Ilara said gently, "which is why I am offering." She reached up and unfastened the iron collar from her neck. It fell to the stone floor and shattered into 1,000 pieces, pieces that began to glow with soft silver light. "I was never just a servant," she said. "I was meant to come here. My mother knew. The Deathless One knew. I was born for this moment, to stand beside you and share the weight until we can set it down together." Raiden's hands gripped hers so tightly she thought her bones might break. "Do you understand what you are saying? If you do this, you will be tied to me, bound. Your life will never be your own." "My life was never my own," Ilara said. "I was born beneath a curse of my own, the curse of the unwanted Omega. At least this curse has meaning. At least this one I choose." She brought his hand to her heart, and he felt it beating strong and steady beneath her ribs. "Let me save you," she whispered. "Let me be the proof that redemption is possible." And in the blue torchlight of that ancient chamber, beneath the weight of 10,000 ghosts, the Alpha King bowed his head and wept. For the first time in 5 years, he was not alone with his burden, and the curse, sensing the presence of one who could truly bear it, began to change. The morning after their descent into the deep places, Raiden summoned his war council. The announcement would shake the foundations of the kingdom. Ilara stood in her servants' quarters, her hands trembling as the castle erupted into chaos. The whispers became shouts. The rumors became declarations of blasphemy. An Omega. As Luna? She was a servant, a nameless girl from nowhere. "This is madness. The king has lost his mind." But Raiden did not waver. He had called an assembly, the first formal court gathering in months. Every noble house, every alpha of standing, every elder of the northern territories would attend, and before them all, he would declare his choice. Ilara was given new clothes, a gown of deep blue silk that caught the firelight like water. Her hair was braided with silver thread, but no crown was placed upon her head. That would come only after she survived the trials that were about to begin. As she was led through the castle corridors toward the great hall, she could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes. Servants who had worked beside her for years now looked at her as if she were a stranger, some with jealousy, some with fear, some with something that might have been respect. The great hall was packed to bursting. Torches burned in every sconce, casting the stone faces of ancient kings into shadow. The throne sat empty. Raiden would not take it. Not for this. The doors opened, and he entered. He wore the formal regalia of the Alpha King, robes of black wool edged with silver fur, the circlet of Valorheim upon his brow. But it was his eyes that commanded attention, those ancient silver eyes burning with purpose. The scar on his face seemed to glow in the torchlight. Ilara was led forward by the master of ceremonies. All eyes followed her progress toward the center of the hall, where Raiden stood waiting. "I have called you here," he began, his voice carrying easily through the vast space, "because the line between tradition and survival has become razor thin. For 5 years, I have ruled alone, believing that strength meant isolation, that a king could carry the weight of the kingdom without bearing the weight of companionship." He paused, and the silence was absolute. "I was wrong." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Raiden's gaze swept across the assembly, and every person who met his eyes seemed to shrink beneath that silver stare. "The curse that marks me is not a sign of weakness," he continued. "It is evidence of my humanity, of my capacity to feel regret, to understand consequence, to desire redemption. and I have found that redemption." He turned to Ilara, and his expression softened in a way that made the hall collectively draw breath. This is Ilara, born an Omega, destined to be invisible. But she saw me, truly saw me, when everyone else saw only the crown and the scar. She offered to walk into darkness so that I might find light, and I am offering her the only thing a king can offer: my truth, my struggle, and my faith that together we can break the cycle of curse and suffering that has bound this kingdom for generations. One of the elder Alphas stood. His name was Lord Vargrim, and he had served Raiden's father before him. His face was carved from contempt. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice dripping with venom, "you are asking us to accept an Omega, a creature of inferior blood, as our Luna. This is not tradition. This is heresy." "Then execute me for heresy," Raiden replied calmly. "Take my life and put one of you on the throne, but understand this. The moment you choose the old ways over the future, you condemn us all." The curse was born from pride, and the belief that some lives matter more than others. That same pride is rotting this kingdom from within. He extended his hand to Ilara. "Ilara has offered to bear the curse alongside me, to share the weight until we can understand what it means. This is not about rank or bloodline. This is about whether we believe a person's worth is measured by what they were born as, or by the choices they make." Ilara stepped forward and took his hand. The moment their skin touched, a visible shimmer ran through the hall, a wave of energy that made every candle flare brighter, every torch burn with blue flame. The wolves in the kennels below began to howl in harmony, a sound like choirs singing. Lord Vargrim's face turned white. Others gasped, some bowed their heads. "There will be trials," Raiden continued, his voice steady, "to prove that she is worthy, to prove that this is not whimsy or curse sickness, but a deliberate choice rooted in strength and strategy. In 7 days, Ilara will undergo the trials of the Luna, tests of will, of loyalty, of wisdom. If she survives, she will be crowned beside me. If she fails—" He paused, and his grip on her hand tightened slightly. "Then she goes free, with my blessing and my eternal gratitude." Lord Vargrim stepped forward, his jaw clenched. "And if she fails, because she is fundamentally unfit for such power, then what, Your Majesty? Do we return to stability, or do we remain cursed?" Raiden's expression hardened. "If she fails, then we discover that I am wrong, and I will accept that consequence. But I do not believe I am wrong. I believe that the weakest among us often carry the greatest strength, that an Omega branded as worthless is more valuable than 100 Alphas who believe themselves superior." He turned to address the entire assembly now, his voice ringing with authority. "The trials will be witnessed by all of you. They will be fair and just, and at the end of 7 days, you will know the truth. Not because I have declared it, but because you will have seen it with your own eyes and felt it in your bones." He raised Ilara's hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to her palm, a gesture of honor, not possession. The hall went absolutely silent. "The first trial begins at sunset tomorrow," he announced, "in the Chamber of Wind, where the old magic still dwells. Bring your doubts, your weapons, your certainty. Let us see what remains when illusion is stripped away." As the court was dismissed, nobles and Alphas filing out in confusion and outrage, Ilara felt the weight of what she had accepted truly settle upon her shoulders. 7 days, 7 trials, 7 chances to fail and be cast out forever. But as she looked up at Raiden's scarred face, at the determination burning in those ancient silver eyes, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. He believed in her. And in this kingdom of violence and pride and old magic, that belief was the only currency that mattered. Somewhere far above, in the tower where the oldest priestesses still kept their vigil, a bell began to ring. Once, twice, a third time. The song of the moon had been sung. The challenge had been made. and all the old powers were watching to see if an Omega servant would prove stronger than the kings. The Chamber of Wind existed between the castle and the sky. Built into the highest tower of Valorheim, accessible only by a spiral staircase carved from a single piece of ancient stone, it was the place where the old magic gathered. The walls were translucent crystal, and through them you could see the entire kingdom spread below, the mountains, the forests, the frozen lake that had never thawed in living memory. The sun was setting as Alara climbed the stairs, dressed now in the garments of a trial candidate. Simple gray linen, no ornament, no protection. She was barefoot. She could feel the cold stone beneath her soles, grounding her, connecting her to the earth far below. Raiden waited at the summit, but he did not enter the chamber with her. Instead, he stood at the threshold and spoke words in the old language, words that made the air shimmer and the wind begin to move with purpose. "The trial of wind tests what you are willing to lose," he said, his voice formal, though his silver eyes held warmth. "The wind will show you illusions of your future, paths you might take, lives you might live. Some will be beautiful, some will be terrible. You must not be deceived into choosing safety over truth." Alara nodded and stepped into the chamber. The moment she crossed the threshold, the doors sealed behind her with a sound like ice breaking. The wind rose immediately. It was not the wind of the natural world. This wind had intention, intelligence, malice. It swirled around her body, lifting her hair, pressing against her skin, as if trying to find the edges of her resolve and peel them back. And then the visions began. She saw herself as a child, sitting in her mother's lap in a small cottage by the sea. Her mother was singing, and her voice was like honey and starlight. "You will be tested," her mother whispered. "You will be asked to give up everything. But you must remember, you are not what they call you. You are not servant. You are not cursed. You are chosen." The vision shattered, and Alara fell to her knees. The wind showed her another path, herself in a great hall, crowned and proud, sitting beside a handsome alpha king who looked at her with hunger but not love. Nobles bowed before her. Servants, once her equals, now trembled in her presence. She had power, authority, everything an Omega was never supposed to want. But in this vision, she was alone. The king looked through her. The court feared her, and she could feel the weight of their resentment like stones in her chest. The vision shattered. Again, the wind shifted, and she saw a third path, herself, old and gray, sitting by a fire in a small cottage far from the castle. Beside her was an elderly man with silver eyes and a scar running down his jaw. They had no power, no kingdom, no one to serve them, but they were peaceful, happy, free. Alara sobbed at the beauty of it. "Choose," the wind whispered, and its voice was every voice she had ever heard. Her mother, the servants, the nobles, Raiden, the deathless one herself. "Choose safety. Choose love. Choose power. Choose freedom. You cannot have them all. Choose." Alara pressed her forehead to the crystal floor and felt the cold burn against her skin. She was shaking. Every part of her was fracturing under the weight of impossible choices. And then she understood. The wind was not asking her to choose between paths. It was asking her to choose what she truly was beneath all the roles and expectations and futures imposed upon her. She stood slowly, her hands clenched into fists. "I choose none of it," she said, and her voice was steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "I choose the path that is not yet written. I choose to walk into uncertainty because I believe that the future is not fixed. I will not trade my pain for safety. I will not trade my integrity for power, and I will not trade my connection to the world for the illusion of peace." The wind howled in response, a sound so terrible that the crystal walls shook. But Alara did not flinch. She stood at the center of the chamber and opened her arms, letting the wind wash through her, seeing all the visions at once, every path, every possibility, every version of herself she might become. And she refused to choose. "I am Alara," she declared. "I was born in darkness and raised in invisibility. I was branded a servant and taught to believe I was worthless. But I choose to be all of these things and none of them. I choose to be broken and strong, powerless and powerful, seen and unseen. I choose to be human in a world that demands I be either a symbol or nothing at all." The crystal chamber burst with light, the wind ceased, the visions dissolved, and for a moment, just a moment, the air itself seemed to hold its breath in recognition. Then the doors swung open. Ryden stood in the threshold, and his silver eyes were shining with tears. The entire court had gathered behind him on the tower stairs, nobles, alphas, elders, all of them bearing witness. Alara stepped out of the chamber, and she was changed. The iron collar was gone. Her brand marks, the signs of her servitude, had faded from her skin. She looked the same and completely different. "The trial of wind is complete," the oldest priestess announced, stepping forward from the crowd. She was ancient, bent with age, but her eyes were sharp as knife blades. "The candidate has not been deceived. She has not chosen illusion over truth. She is clear-eyed and honest. Let the court record that Alara of the Silver Wind is worthy of the next trial." As Ryden pulled her into his arms, shielding her from the stares of the assembled crowd, Alara heard him whisper against her hair, "What did you see? In the wind?" "The truth," she replied, "that I was always going to choose this, that every path led here, that we were meant to meet, and that together we are stronger than the curse that binds us." Ryden's arms tightened around her, and for just a moment, the scarred and burdened king allowed himself to believe that redemption might be possible after all. 3 days later, the second trial began. The Chamber of Fire was located deep beneath the castle, in the oldest part of Valorheim, where the stones themselves seemed to remember a time before humans walked the earth. The walls glowed with an inner heat, and the air was thick with smoke that smelled of cinnamon, blood, and ancient magic. Alara stood at the entrance, now clothed in white linen that would burn easily. The symbolism was clear. She was being tested for sacrifice. "The trial of fire tests what you are willing to burn away," Ryden said, his voice heavy with meaning. He could not touch her now. The rules of the trials demanded that the candidate enter alone. You will be asked to face your greatest shame, your deepest regret, the parts of yourself you believe are unforgivable. Fire reveals truth and consumes lies. Do not run from what you see. Do not try to escape the heat. Face it, and it will not consume you. Alara stepped into the chamber. The doors sealed behind her with a sound like a furnace roaring to life. The chamber was vast, larger than any space should be able to fit within the castle's foundations. And at its center burned a fire that was neither orange nor red, but pure white. It burned so bright that Alara had to shield her eyes. Then the fire began to speak, not in words, but in visions. The flames parted, and Alara saw her own past unfolding before her. She saw herself as a child, different from other Omega pups. While they played with dolls and sang songs of future mates, she had wandered into the forest alone. She had felt the call of something vast and distant, the deathless one perhaps, or the old magic itself. She had been 5 years old and terrified. The fire showed her the moment her mother died. Fever had taken her in the night, and Alara had not been able to save her. The healers said it was not her fault, but Alara had felt it, the gift stirring inside her, the knowledge that if she had been older, stronger, more trained, she could have pulled her mother back from death. The fire showed her the day she was branded and sent to Valorheim. She had been 13. The nobleman who had purchased her had been kind at first, then cruel when she refused his advances. He had marked her as defective, an Omega who did not submit to alpha dominance, who resisted the natural hierarchy. He had declared her a servant, and the rest of the household had followed his lead. all the shame, all the pain, all the moments she had believed herself to be fundamentally wrong, fundamentally broken. The fire burned it all, and Alara watched as the flames consumed her self-hatred. But then the fire shifted, and it showed her something else. A vision of Raiden, years younger, standing over a burning village. His face was full of anguish. The choice before him had been impossible: watch his family die or condemn innocence. He had chosen the lesser evil, or so he had believed. The fire showed her that guilt, that pain, that weight he had carried for so long. And she saw something the curse had hidden from him. In the chaos of the burning village, a small group of those innocents had survived. They had fled into the mountains and built a new settlement. They had learned to live in the harsh wilderness. And 2 generations later, their descendants had become the most skilled warriors in the kingdom, warriors who had gone on to save countless lives. The curse had made him see only the evil of his choice. It had blinded him to the resilience and strength that had emerged from it. The fire showed her that no choice was ever purely good or purely evil. All choices rippled forward in ways that could never be fully predicted or understood. Alara felt the white flames closing in around her, and instead of running, she walked toward them. She spoke to the fire with a voice that no longer trembled. I was born from pain. My mother died from pain. I have lived in pain, but I choose not to let pain define my worth. I choose to see that even in the darkest moments, seeds of something new are being planted. I choose to forgive myself for being human, for making mistakes, for having limits, for not being able to save everyone. And I choose to help the man I love understand that he too deserves that same forgiveness. The white fire exploded outward in a pillar of light so bright that the entire castle seemed to shake. When it settled, Alara stood in the center of the chamber, completely untouched. Not a thread of her garments was singed. But something had changed within her. She could feel it, a kind of peace, a kind of acceptance. She had burned away the need to be perfect. She had burned away her belief that she was fundamentally unworthy. She had burned away the shame. The doors opened. The priestess was waiting, and this time her ancient face was soft with something like awe. The trial of fire is complete, she announced to the gathered court. The candidate has not been consumed by regret. She has not hidden from the heat of her own truth. She has emerged transformed. Let the court record that Alara of the Burning Heart is worthy of the final trial. This time, when Raiden pulled her into his arms, he did not hide his tears. He wept against her hair, and Alara felt him trembling. "What did you see?" he asked. "I saw that we are both broken," she said softly, "and that our brokenness is not a curse. It is where the light gets in." She pulled back and looked into his silver eyes. "I saw that your choice, 5 years ago, was not evil. It was human. And what emerged from it was not only death, but also new life. The fire showed me what the curse had hidden from you." Raiden's breath caught. "Is it true?" "It is true," Alara said. "And when this is over, we will send scouts to the mountains. We will find those survivors. We will make amends. We will choose differently going forward. That is what redemption means." He pulled her close again, and she felt something within him begin to heal. The curse was not broken yet. But it was cracking, and through the cracks, light was beginning to pour. The third and final trial was not a chamber, but a confrontation. Lord Vargrim had been gathering support among the nobles for days, and his patience had finally worn thin. The moment Alara emerged from the trial of fire, he stepped forward with armed knights at his back. "I challenge the authenticity of these trials," he declared, his voice ringing through the great hall. "These are not true tests. They are theater designed by a king who has lost his wits. I demand trial by combat. If the Omega truly has the blood of the Luna, she will be able to withstand the judgment of steel." The court erupted in chaos. Raiden's hand moved to his sword, but Alara placed her palm on his arm and stepped forward. I accept the challenge, she said calmly. No, Ryden said immediately. This is madness. Vargrim is a master of combat. He has killed alphas twice your size. I will not allow— You cannot allow or disallow, Alara said gently. This is my choice. This is my trial to face. The priestess, the ancient woman with sharp eyes, nodded slowly. Trial by blood, then. Let the combat begin at dawn in the Circle of Stones. The Circle of Stones was an ancient arena built into the mountain itself. It was where disputes between alphas were settled, where honor was tested in blood. The walls rose high on all sides, and there was no escape. Alara stood in the center, dressed in simple leather armor, armed with a single blade. Across from her, Lord Vargrim towered like a mountain, twice her size, scarred from 100 battles, wearing armor of burnished steel. The entire court watched from above. Ryden stood at the highest point, his expression carved from stone, his hands clenched so tightly that blood dripped from his palms. You will die here, Vargrim said, raising his massive sword. And your death will be a mercy. It will end this curse sickness that has afflicted our king. Perhaps, Alara replied, but I will not die believing I am unworthy. The signal was given. The combat began. Vargrim attacked with the fury of a man trying to prove a point. His blade crashed down toward Alara like a falling mountain, but she was faster. She rolled beneath the blow and came up slashing at his side, finding the gap in his armor where old scars had warped the metal. He turned and came at her again, and again she danced out of the way. But she was not trying to defeat him. She was observing him, learning his rhythms, understanding his pain. Because Alara could feel it in him, the same wound that burned inside Ryden. Lord Vargrim had something to prove. He believed that the old ways were the only ways because the idea of change terrified him. Change meant that everything he had sacrificed had been for nothing. On the 7th exchange, Vargrim overextended. His massive sword came around in a wide arc, and for just a moment he was completely exposed. Alara could have killed him, could have driven her blade up through the gap in his armor into his heart. Instead, she struck his sword hand. Her blade sang through the air and cut deep, severing tendons, but not killing. The massive sword fell from Vargrim's grip and clattered to the stone. The arena went completely silent. Vargrim staggered backward, staring at his wounded hand in shock. Alara approached him slowly, her blade still raised. I could have killed you, she said, her voice carrying through the arena. I could have proven my strength by taking your life. But strength is not measured in death. Strength is measured in the choices we make when death is offered to us. She lowered her blade. I choose mercy, she said. I choose to believe that you can be something other than your fear, that your attachment to the old ways does not make you evil. It makes you human. And I choose to allow you the dignity of surviving this day and reconsidering what you believe. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Ryden descended from the high point and entered the arena. He approached Alara slowly, reverently, as if approaching something sacred. He knelt before her. The trial of blood is complete. The priestess's voice echoed through the arena. The candidate has not been consumed by violence. She has not proven her worth through death, but through mercy. She is ready. The entire assembly, watching from above, understood in that moment what the trials had truly been teaching them. Strength was not in domination. Power was not in control. Redemption was not in revenge. Redemption was in mercy. That night, Ryden brought Alara to the deepest chamber beneath Valorheim, the place where the curse had been bound, where the covenant with the old powers had been sealed. The book bound in ancient leather waited on its altar of black ice, and around it the symbols burned with silver light. It is time, Ryden said softly. You have proven yourself through all 3 trials. Now comes the final choice. He placed the book in her hands. The curse can be transferred, he explained. It can be given to the one who loves the one who is cursed. In doing so, the curse will lose its power. It will transform into something else, into a bond, a connection that cannot be severed. You will be tied to me, and I to you. Our fates intertwined, our pain shared, our redemption mutual. Ilara opened the book and read the words written within, words in the old language that she somehow could understand. The curse bearer may choose to pass the weight. The bearer of the gift may choose to take it. In this exchange, neither will be cursed. Instead, they will be bound, and in binding, they will discover that the weight becomes lighter when shared. She looked up at Raiden. If I accept this binding, I will no longer be an Omega. The transformation will be complete. Yes, Raiden said, you will be of no rank at all, and yet, paradoxically, you will be every rank. You will be everything and nothing. The hierarchy of the old ways will collapse when they see what a being can become when they are bound to truth rather than blood. Ilara smiled and began to speak the words of binding. As she spoke, the chamber filled with light. The curse, that ancient wound of guilt and shame, began to take physical form. It rose from Raiden's body like smoke, dark and terrible and beautiful. And Ilara pulled it into herself. She gasped as the weight of 5 years of suffering entered her. She felt every death he had caused, every choice he had regretted, every moment he had spent believing himself to be beyond redemption. It was almost too much. For a moment, she felt herself drowning in it. Then Raiden was beside her, his hands on her face, his silver eyes locked with hers. "Do not let it consume you," he whispered. "Take it, but do not accept it as truth. It is the weight of circumstance and choice, but it is not a measure of worth. It is not destiny. It is only what happened." Ilara breathed deeply and felt the truth of his words. The curse was real, but it was not final. It was a story they had been told about themselves, not the only story that could be told. The chamber exploded with light. When it faded, both Ilara and Raiden were glowing with soft silver luminescence. The curse was still there. She could feel it burning inside her, beneath her ribs, but it had been transformed. It was no longer a wound. It was a source of strength. The iron collar that had been around her neck was no longer a symbol of servitude. Instead, around both of them, invisible but undeniable, was a bond of light and blood and choice. They were no longer two people. They were two halves of a single redemptive story. The coronation took place at midnight, beneath the full moon that had risen silver and impossibly large over Valorheim. The entire kingdom gathered in the great square before the castle. Nobles and servants alike stood witness. Even Lord Vargrim was there, his wounded hand wrapped in bandages, watching with an expression of complicated resignation. The priestess, the ancient woman who had guided the trials, placed the Luna crown upon Ilara's head. It was made of silver that seemed to drink in the moonlight, and at its center was a single black stone that contained, within its depths, what looked like falling snow. Raiden took Ilara's hand, and together, they turned to face the assembled kingdom. "I present to you the Luna of Valorheim," the priestess declared. "Born of the gift, forged in trials of wind and fire and blood, bound to the Alpha King in covenant, not conquest. Together, they will lead this kingdom into a new age, an age where strength is measured not in dominance, but in mercy, where worth is not determined by blood, but by choice." The crowd began to cheer. But Ilara heard something else beneath the cheers, the sound of wolves singing, and as she looked out over the kingdom, she saw them, silver wolves emerging from the forests, walking among the people without fear or aggression. The old magic itself, it seemed, had approved of this union. That night, as Raiden and Ilara stood together on the highest tower of Valorheim, looking out over the moonlit kingdom, she felt the curse burning inside her, but it no longer felt like a burden. "Does it hurt?" Raiden asked softly, his hand resting on the place where the curse burned brightest. "Yes," Ilara said honestly, "but it is the good kind of hurt. like a scar that has healed, like a wound that teaches you something about yourself. Raiden pulled her close, and they stood together in silence as the moon climbed higher in the sky. I spent 5 years believing that redemption was impossible, he said finally, that the curse was permanent, that I would carry this shame until I died. And now? Alara asked. Now I understand that redemption is not about erasing what happened. It is about choosing to do differently going forward. It is about allowing someone else to believe in your possibility when you cannot believe in your own. He turned to face her fully, and in the moonlight, his scar seemed to glow. You saved me, Alara, not by taking away my curse, but by agreeing to walk alongside me beneath it. Alara reached up and traced the line of his scar with her fingertip. You saved me first, she said. The moment you saw me. The moment you looked past the servant's dress and the iron collar and saw a person worthy of standing beside the king. That was the beginning of my redemption. They kissed then, not with passion or hunger, but with the profound tenderness of two broken people who had learned to hold each other's pieces without trying to fix them. Above them, the moon seemed to pulse with approval, and in the mountains, in the forests, in every corner of Valorheim, the wolves sang songs of transformation and hope. Epilogue. 10 years passed. The kingdom transformed gradually at first, then with gathering momentum. The old hierarchy of Alpha and Omega began to dissolve. Talented people rose to positions of power regardless of their birth rank. Laws were written to protect the vulnerable. The survivors of Vargrim's village, those descendants of the innocents Raiden had sacrificed, were found and brought home. Reparations were made. Relationships were built. Alara bore Raiden 2 children, a son who inherited his father's silver eyes and his mother's gift for seeing truth in others, and a daughter who could speak to the wolves and heal with her touch. Neither was born with a rank. Both were born free. The curse never fully disappeared, but it became something different, a reminder of the capacity for both harm and healing. Raiden still woke sometimes in the night, haunted by ghosts, and Alara still felt the weight of those deaths, still grieved for the lives cut short. But they bore it together, and bearing it together made all the difference. On the 10-year anniversary of Alara's coronation, she stood once more on the highest tower of Valorheim with her husband. She wore the Luna crown, now decorated with additional silver that had been added year by year, each piece a symbol of a choice made toward mercy. Do you regret it? Raiden asked, as he asked her on the first night they stood in this place. Accepting the curse? Binding yourself to me? Alara looked out over the kingdom she had helped heal, and considered the question seriously. No, she said finally. I chose this with full knowledge of what it would cost, and the price has been worth paying. Because in choosing to walk beneath the weight with you, I found that I was not invisible after all. I found that my love, my presence, my willingness to stand beside you could be the foundation of something beautiful. She turned to him and smiled. I was born to this, as my mother told me, not to be cursed, but to be chosen. And I would make this choice 1,000 times over. Raiden pulled her into his arms, and they stood together as the moonlight fell around them like benediction. Below them, the wolves sang their eternal song. And somewhere in the spaces between earth and sky, the Deathless One herself smiled, knowing that redemption, true redemption, was not about escaping suffering. It was about having someone stand beside you while you bore it. It was about transforming the wound into wisdom. It was about choosing every single day to love despite the cost. It was about 2 broken people learning to make each other whole. Your heartbeat alongside ours. If your heart beat with ours through these moonlit confessions, if you felt the weight of curse and the lightness of redemption, then like, comment, and subscribe, because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive. Tell us, Where in the world are you watching from? And at what hour of the night did this story find you? We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel, and at what moments they reach hearts like yours. Welcome to Moonblood Chronicles, where rejection becomes destiny, where mercy crowns even the fallen, where love is not a reward, but a revolution,